Thank you very much, Nico. It's great to be here. My name is Jim Zenner, as Nico mentioned. Welcome to Congressman Ted Lieu's annual Veteran Appreciation Event, Conversations with Veterans. I'm the Director of Los Angeles County Department of Military and Veteran Affairs and an Army veteran who served on active duty from 2004 to 2008, with one 15-month deployment to Iraq, and then I continued to serve in the reserves from 2008 to 2011. I will be your MC today for the first half of the program, and my co-MC today for the entire program is Janet Turner, Representative Lieu's Deputy District Director for Outreach and the producer of this event.
Thanks so much for being with us today, Jim, and welcome to the many community members who have joined us today. I'll be here to add some color to the program. Back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Janet. Congressman Ted Lieu has organized a special event which was originally created by author Sebastian Junger. In the tradition of warrior storytelling today, veterans will describe their stories along with the emotions of pride, grief, rage, or quiet appreciation of life that service to their country bestowed upon them. Each veteran will be given up to 5 minutes to speak about something they experienced while in the armed forces. This event is solemn and nonpartisan, but it's also fun and inspirational. Non-military viewers are invited to listen and learn. Janet?
And before we get started, I'd just like to mention that this program is being recorded and will be posted on Rep. Lieu's social media in a few days.
All right, so let's begin by standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, and if you are able, and remain standing for the national anthem. Leading the Pledge of Allegiance is Takashi Fukushima, U.S. Army Colonel retired who served in the Korean War. Talk, as he likes to be called, was a unit commander for the 5th Regiment Combat Team, 24th Infantry Division, 525th Military Intelligence Group. While in Korea, he often had to go to the front lines to talk to prisoners of war. It was a very dangerous mission. And as a result, he was awarded the Bronze Star, the Meritorious Service Medal, and the Combat Infantry Badge. Talk is currently 94. He and his wife are Torrance residents and have been married for 74 years. Talk. Please begin the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good morning. Please place your right hand over your heart or render a hand salute as we recite the pledge to the flag of our country. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Todd. Our national anthem is being performed today by singer, songwriter, and motivational speaker, U.S. Army Captain retired, Maxine Reyes. Ms. Reyes performed the national anthem many times during her military career. After serving 11 years in the Air Force, she transferred to the beloved Army to become an officer and served another 11 years, culminating with a total of 22 years of honorable service. Today, she is a successful recording artist and a professional sports national anthem singer, having performed for the NFL Miami Dolphins, NBA Miami Heat, and MLB Tampa Bay Rays, just to name a few. Maxine, please begin when you're ready.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red, the bombs bursting in gave proof through the night that our flag was still still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the lands of the free and the home of the brave.
Jim, you're muted.
I am so sorry. Thank you, Maxine. That was absolutely beautiful. Now over to Jan.
Well, Jim, you had mentioned that Maxine's a motivational speaker as well as a singer. And through her Courage and Grace Foundation, she actually empowers and motivates college students, youth clubs, and women at empowerment events. So she has a multifaceted career, and we're very grateful that she could be with us today. Back to you.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much for your service to our country, Maxine, and your continued service. It is now my pleasure to introduce the host of the event, Congressman Ted Lieu. Representative Lieu successfully was elected to a sixth term in the House of Representatives and currently represents the 36th congressional district in which I live. He currently serves on the House Judiciary Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee. In Congress, Congressman Lieu has established himself as a leader on the environment, cybersecurity, and veterans issues. Last year, he was also elected by his colleagues to serve as vice chair of the Democratic Caucus, making him the highest-ranking Asian American to ever serve in House leadership. Congressman Lieu is a veteran, having served on active duty and then in the reserves for the Air Force. He retired from the reserve in 2021 with the rank of colonel. Welcome, Congressman Ted Lieu.
Thank you so much, Jim, for taking your time to be MC today and for your service in the Army, as well as your current service with LA County. And I want to also thank Korean War veteran Takeshi Fukushima, who is a retired colonel, for leading the Pledge of Allegiance, as well as singer, songwriter, and U.S. Army retired Captain Maxine Reyes for your beautiful rendition of the national anthem. And I want to thank all the speakers for participating today. This is an annual event that we do every year, and it is based on something that Sebastian Younger has been advocating and doing, and we listen to stories and we listen to people's experiences in the military. We don't have any judgment. We just listen and reflect, and hopefully all who are participating, you will learn something from their different experiences and stories that you'll hear today. And I just want to give a few remarks about Veterans Day. So we honor veterans on this Veterans Day weekend. And one of the reasons we do it is not only because it's the morally right thing to do, but also because we have an all-volunteer military. And one of the things that people across America look at is, well, how do we treat our folks in the military, particularly when they leave the military? And if we don't treat our veterans well, then that becomes a disincentive for people who want to join our military. So helping our veterans is not only the right thing to do, it's also helpful for national security because it continues our military to be able to attract the best and brightest. I'm honored to have been able to get legislation signed into law to help veterans. One of the first bills that got signed into law was to help revitalize the West LA VA. It put out a whole new master plan for the VA that at its full build out is going to have over 1,000 units, perhaps even a few thousand units of housing for homeless veterans. Very pleased that by January, just a few months from now, the West LA VA will have 7 buildings of permanent supportive housing with nearly 500 units for previously unhoused veterans. And then by the end of next year, 4 more buildings will open, bringing their total to over 700 units for unhoused veterans. And hopefully we're going to continue to make sure that not only do we have housing for veterans, but also continue the medical care that has been great that they've been receiving the last few years. prior to my bill, the medical rating at the West Valley VA was in the middle range. Now it is in a high range. And so I want to commend all the staff at the West Valley VA for the great work they do for both medical care as well as taking care of veterans. And then just one more issue I want to bring up. Last term, Congress did pass the PACT Act, which provided uh, a number of benefits for folks who served in our military and then were injured by toxic substances. And it's already delivered more than 6.8 billion in benefits to veterans and their survivors. My office stands ready to assist if anyone believes they have a claim under the PACT Act and needs assistance. Please contact my office. So with that, I look forward to listening to the terrific speakers we have today. And I'll turn it back over now to Jim.
Thank you very much, Congressman Lieu. Our first speaker today is veteran Ryan Perosi, who was an Air Force captain. He attended the Air Force Academy from 1994 to 1998. He then went on to serve from 1998 to 2003 during the Operation Enduring Freedom during the War on Terror. His profession was weapons systems cost analyst, and he was stationed at the Pentagon on 9/11. He is currently an executive for MGM Amazon. Ryan, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thanks for having me, Congressman, and thanks for hosting Jim and Janet. It's pretty hard to follow Tack and Maxine. That was outstanding. As you mentioned, I was commissioned as an Air Force officer at the Air Force Academy in 1998. Many of my classmates have gone on to do great things in defense of our nation. Many of them are still in the service, and I even have a classmate, Nick Hague, who's currently on the International Space Station that we're all very proud of. And many of my friends, unfortunately, and classmates gave the ultimate sacrifice, and I think of them on this Veterans Day. I had what you might call a desk job in the Air Force. In the summer of 2001, as a first lieutenant, I left Randolph Air Force Base in Texas and was assigned to the Pentagon. As you mentioned, as a weapons systems cost analyst, my job was to help Air Force acquisition programs move through the congressional review process. My unit had offices in the Pentagon and a few hundred yards away in Crystal City. It had only been a few months since I was assigned to the Pentagon on the morning of 9/11, and I was actually in our Crystal City offices, fairly close to the parking lot, but due in the Pentagon for a meeting. When the planes first hit the World Trade Center in New York, my immediate thought was of my mother, who at the time was working at a very high floor in the one of the tallest buildings in New York City, the Chrysler Building. I was glued to the TV and decided just to skip my Pentagon meeting, which happened to be very close to the impact site. I actually had drawn the short straw and was supposed to be supervising drug testing that morning. You'll remember on that day, American Airlines Flight 77 was hijacked and crashed into the Pentagon, killing all 64 people on board the plane and 125 people in the Pentagon. I remember there being just tons of confusion and even misinformation. I remember distinctly someone yelling, "They just hit the White House." Of course, that didn't happen, but it was emblematic of the fog of war in that moment. And I had to admit, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I felt like I was supposed to grab a weapon and charge up a hill somewhere. But there wasn't very much we could do in that moment. In fact, our direction was simply to evacuate and stay on call. In the confusion and fog of war, I actually left my phone and my keys at the office. My wife and I had recently moved into a new home, and I hadn't had a chance to meet the neighbors. My wife, also an Air Force officer, was stationed across the Potomac at Bolling Air Force Base, and she wasn't home. So I wanted to leave her a note. And I knocked on the door of our neighbors who lived underneath us. I'd never met them, as I mentioned. And when I knocked on the door in my military uniform, I heard screaming and glass breaking. And I heard some more screaming, more glass breaking, and the door opened, asking what I wanted. And I just said, "I want a pen and pad." Door closes, more glass breaking. Door opens, out comes 5 pads and 5 pens. Long story short, it turns out that an Afghan family had lived under us. And I feel terrible that they thought something was going on that morning as someone in the military was knocking on their door. But at the end, they were excellent neighbors. I left my wife a note, and eventually I was able to get out to Bolling Air Force Base to see her and get keys to our condo. But that was only after almost getting shot a few times, I think, because we had fan junior enlisted out across the base, not knowing what to expect that day. And again, it's just about the fog of war for me. The Pentagon, of course, had to keep operating as headquarters of our armed services. So we were in the office within hours. but I certainly wasn't going to do my day job. I volunteered to work in a call center to take calls coming into the Pentagon, where we were helping direct people looking for their loved ones, and if any of the loved ones were affected, passing them off to bereavement officers. For me, this story is really just about, as I've mentioned a few times, the fog of war. We were all trained, and even though that was a tremendously dark day for America and confusing day to be on the ground, at the end of the day, our systems and our training and our leadership kicked in, and we worked together. My wife was actually stationed at the Armory at Bolling Air Force Base. I didn't see her for a few days, and I know everyone has their own 9/11 story, but that's mine.
Thank you very much for sharing your story and your service to our country, Ryan.
Thanks, Jim.
As you know, Jim, that was a terrible tragedy, and so many people were killed. Those who were killed are remembered by the Pentagon Memorial, which features memorial benches for the 184 victims, from the youngest victim, who was 3 years old, Dana Falkenberg, to the oldest, who was 71 years old, John Yemnicki. We honor them all. Back to you, Jim.
Thanks, John.
So our next speaker is Gregory Jones, U.S. Navy Lieutenant Commander, retired. Gregory is currently a trauma educator and injury prevention and outreach coordinator for Cedars-Sinai Hospital. Gregory served for 26 years from March 1988 to December 2013. He had numerous professions. Today, he's going to tell how he went from a fire controlman when he first entered the service to eventually becoming a Navy emergency trauma nurse. Gregory, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Congressman, for having me and having us here today. Thank you, Colonel Fukushima, for your service, sir, as well as Captain Reyes, and thank you, Jim, as well, for your service. Janet, thank you for hosting and putting this all together. So my story is kind of rambling, and I'll kind of end with, I started off feeling more, as I looked at it at this particular point, looking back, like Forrest Gump, as I joined the Navy, essentially out of high school. I graduated at 16 years old. So I was a pretty sharp kid, took AP everything from 8th grade on. So 16 years old, and I'm a high school graduate. So I had some friends that were still in school, and one of them, who was my age, got expelled. Top Gun was the movie du jour, and we had seen that because we had a lot of time to kill. And as he had to figure out what to do with his life, he joined. And I had to figure out, as a kid on the south side of Chicago, what did I want to do? I didn't think about going to college. As smart as I was, no one had said you should apply and do these things. So I followed my friend's lead and joined the Navy. I was 16. I had just turned 17. So my mother had to sign me into the Navy. So I joined, having seen Top Gun. I did not have aspirations of flying. I wanted to be the guy that jumped out of the helicopter to save Goose. So right out the gate, I was looking to help others. What I didn't know was that you really needed to swim a lot better than I could. So as they put me in the pool, they spent more time. I'll jump off of anything, but they spent more time saving me than I saved anybody else. That didn't work out for me with that choice to be an aviation anti-submarine warfare operator. So I was going to be in the helicopter hunting for subs. And then when the call came to jump out and rescue people, they said, no, that's not a good career choice. So I became a fire controlman, which is a weapons person, so launching missiles and guns. I got assigned to the USS Wisconsin right out of A school, and my other colleagues got assigned to the Iowa. The USS Iowa had an unfortunate accident where the turret exploded in turret 2 on the Iowa. I was assigned to turret 3 on the Wisconsin, and was like, wow, that could be me. And I lost friends that day, and it was kind of like, whoa, this was what have I signed up for? And one of my other friends, he was working on a weapon system on the Wisconsin, the Tomahawk cruise missile, and at that time we had nuclear tipped weapons. So that means we had a Marine contingent that provided security perimeter when they were working on those weapons. And one of my friends was working on the weapon that day. So I went to walk past the security cordon to say hello to my buddy. Needless to say, the Marines didn't allow me to do that. So I also had a career choice that moment too, was that I didn't like being on the opposite end of the security cordon. So I was like, how do I become a Tomahawk tech? And the Navy said, okay, well, off you go to school. I started working on the Tomahawk cruise missiles, the Harpoon cruise missiles, and I got assigned from the East Coast to the West Coast. And I went out on the USS Merrill during Gulf Desert Storm. We got to Kuwait right after the shooting stopped, and we were the first ship to actually enter the port of Kuwait post end of that conflict. So that was unique that we were sailors in a war zone in civilian clothes being protected by Marines as we just walked around a war zone. Over the rest of that time, and fast forward 10 years of multiple deployments and different trainings around the country and world, I was in South America doing drug ops. And there was a Navy nurse that came on our ship to teach us how to stop smoking. For those that didn't serve, the way to catch a break in the Navy was, hey, I need a smoke break. Can I go take a break? I didn't smoke, but I definitely took a lot of smoke breaks. And so when the officer came, the nurse came to teach us how to stop smoking, I saw that as an opportunity to take a longer break. So I went and I learned how to stop smoking, but I got to meet a nurse. I had some preconceived notions in my head of what a male nurse was or did or how they would behave. And this person was professional and an example. And I said, sir, how do I learn to do more of that like you do? And he said, well, I'm in Balboa Hospital in San Diego. I'm working this weekend. When you guys pull back in, give me a hoot. So I pulled back into port that following week. I reached out to the ensign and I said, sir, can I come check it out? And I said, I only want to meet male nurses. So he said, fantastic. He took me around the hospital and we wound up in the NICU. I got a chance to meet another Navy nurse who was a former or a Navy SEAL who'll become a nurse. So here's this, and he was the epitome of the Navy SEAL. He looked like he got stung by a hive of hornets. So he's huge. And he has this tiny little infant in the crook of his arm with a tiny little bottle. And I asked him, sir, what would make you stop being a SEAL to become a nurse? And he said, well, petty officer, I was a young man then. And he said, it only takes this to kill a person. But it takes everything that I know, everything that I've done, and everything that I am to keep this tiny little baby alive. And that's more rewarding than anything I've ever done. Well, I was sold. So I applied. I got accepted into the medical enlisted commissioning program, and off to school I went. Ultimately, I went to the University of Illinois. I became a nurse. And then my first assignment was to Naval Hospital, Great Lakes. I was an ensign and I met my chief nurse and she said, where do you want to go, sir? Or ensign? And I said, ma'am, I want to go in the emergency department. And she said, well, you're going to inpatient mental health. You're going to be a psych nurse. How's that feel? I said, well, ma'am, I go where I'm told, I do what I'm told, and I'll grow where I'm planted. And she said, that's the right attitude. So I spent some time in the psych department as a nurse there. I deployed a few more times, ultimately becoming and making my way to the emergency department. Trauma nurse kind of built around me, several more deployments. Ultimately, I achieved my master's degree and I achieved rank. And then I finally found that, okay, it's time for me to retire. So after 25 years, 9 months, and several days, just short of 26, I retired. I was able to then transition to civiliandom and I went to work for the VA, but ultimately after several years there, I transitioned over to Cedars-Sinai. All that background, all those deployments and all that experience has now translated into my role now where I get to give back to my community, whether it's veterans, it's civilians, or in the general public, to use all those skills and to, instead of pulling a trigger, use my mind, soul, and heart to make people better and to help them achieve things. So I've seen the tip of the spear. I've been more of the shaft at times, but I've been very fortunate to keep progressing, growing where I'm planted, and being of service to my fellow human beings, both in uniform and out. So now I wear a different uniform, but I'm very proud to continue serving and continue helping. So thank you for having me here today to share those career stories. Thank you.
What an inspirational story and a great reminder to take the time to help another person out because you never know when we can change the trajectory of somebody's life. So thank you very much, Gregory.
And Jim, I don't know if you know, but Navy nurses are part of the One Navy medical team. They represent an essential part of the Navy's advanced medical system. And from 2010 to 2020, more than 3,000 Navy nurses deployed in support of every combat commander's area of operation. they can increase survival rates even in near-death injuries by 50%. So it's very, very important work, and we thank Gregory for doing it. Who's our next speaker?
So our next speaker is Harry Moyer, who was a U.S. Army Air Corps captain and combat pilot who flew missions during World War II. He later joined the Flying Tigers. For those who don't know, the Flying Tigers was a group of American volunteer pilots who fought in World War II for the Republic of China Air Force. The group was led by General Claire Lee Chenault, U.S. Army retired. The Flying Tigers were formed to help oppose the Japanese invasion of China. The group first saw combat on December 20th, 1941, 12 days after Pearl Harbor, and achieved the first American aerial victory in the Pacific Theater. Last year, Harry returned to China with the Sino-American Aviation Heritage Foundation and received a hero's welcome. Harry is 104 years young and is going to tell us what he remembers most about his time in the service. Janet, you have a few questions for Harry?
I do. Harry, you joined the Army Air Corps during World War II. Did you see much combat?
Well, I was commissioned in the as second lieutenant and a pilot in January 1943. I went overseas in May of 43 and served in North Africa, Sicily, Italy until January of 44. I had a full tour of duty over there, flying a P-40, mostly ground support. I did have a couple of aerial combats, and I had 2 aircraft to my credit. But in January of 1944, our 33rd Fighter Group stood down their operations in Italy and was being transferred to China to the 14th Air Force under command of General Claire Chenault. I could have gone home, but I always had a very warm feeling for the Chinese people and Chenault because of the terrible atrocities that the Japanese were inflicted upon the Chinese people at that time, the rape in Nanking and others. So I went to China. I went to China with the group, and our first stop was in Karachi, India. We were to get P-47s there. They were on the boat coming, but they did not have them available. So they had some P-40s, and they equipped my squadron, the 59th, of which I was a flight leader, with P-40s and directed us to be attached to the 23rd Fighter Group in China for further duties. So there's 12 of us. There's 3 flights in a squadron consisting of 4 airplanes, plus our operations officer and our commanding officer. So 14 airplanes flew from Karachi up to across India up to SM, Burma, and then over the hump into Kunming, where I met General Chenault, which was a great honor to me. And
so Harry, why was General Chenault so special to you?
Well, if you read his history, he was the first ultimate fighter pilot. He started the Fighter Air Corps thought after World War I, and he developed the fighter tactics that a slower airplane at that time could take the high perch on a bomber formation, make a dive on them time and time again, and make effective use of their limited facilities. So it was very effective, and that's what he taught in his combat experience in China. He was a very great observer, a great innovator. He was a kind of an outcast in the Air Corps at that time because of his control by the bomber faction, so to speak, and the money was very, very tight. So obviously, the fighter group was second best. but he persevered. He went to all the colleges and came out high for the highest honors. And he demonstrated his tactics at the war games on the East and West Coast, and was very successful. And there is a Chinese colonel that saw them in his action that he had these biplanes. He would tie a rope and he would be the leader. He had two wingmen. They tie a 40-foot rope on and they do all kinds of acrobatics and fighter tactics. And this was in Miami in the 1930s, late 30s. And he asked them to come to China and form an Air Corps and teach the Chinese people, the Chinese, how to fly airplanes. So Chenault was hired by the Chinese government and established a school there. He trained Chinese students. And then the AVG was a organization that was formed also in the 1940s, late 40s, that provided the
Yeah. So Harry, that's obviously then that's how the Flying Tigers got born. Let's talk a little bit about today. You're involved with the Sino-American Aviation Heritage Foundation to create educational programs for children in America and China to foster better relations between the U.S. and China. I understand your work has been welcomed with open arms by the Chinese government. Tell us about your trip last year.
Well, the foundation group, which I'm a member, was had a letter from President Xi addressed to our chairman, addressed to me, and addressed to Mel McMillan as the veterans that were going to be welcomed to China on a tour of the Flying Tigers museums in China. He also, in that letter, welcomed us, and he also endorsed the program that we had to establish a linear program of the Flying Tigers time in China between the Chinese high schools and middle schools and the like schools here in America. So we attended two schools, one in Kunming and one in Lingshan, which was bombed terribly. It was leveled out, and that's where the Japanese finally surrendered. So the Ministry of Education in China has endorsed that they will take 100 American students a year for 5 years to bring them over there to visit the Flying Tigers history. And also that our foundation will take Chinese people, students of this program, and bring them over here to America and introduce them to our areas where the Chinese were trained in Arizona, and to show them the Americans' heritages. So
you're a real diplomat.
what?
You're a real diplomat, bringing the countries back together.
Well, you know, the story of the Flying Tigers is that, yes, in December of 1941, the Japanese were always bombing these cities without any recourse. They had no assets against them. And the Flying Tigers were the first effective force against them. And on this day, there were 8 bombers came over, and Schultz spotted his limited facilities, which was just 2 squadrons, 8 airplanes. And when they came in, they made an attack on them. They shot down 3 of them, and right before Kunming, and another one was shot down on the way home. All that Sentai, that's a group of the Japanese Air Force, they all went home severely damaged and all had casualties. Well, the Chinese people saw this, And they were so happy. It was the first time that they had any relief from this. And they all marched out from Kunming to the airfield about 6 miles away with flowers and banners and everything. And they just celebrated what these guys did. And that became the foundation of the Flying Tigers and the friendship and the bond between the Chinese people and the American people. And it exists today. So that's the message, that the friendship that was developed between China and the American people. China has never forgotten that. And it's kind of a forgotten thing in America because we do not teach our history. But in December of last year, I was invited to the Asian Pacific Conference in San Francisco, where President Xi was there, and they sent a car down for myself and my friend, and I don't know, we just showed up there, and we were whizzed on into the ready room, and we were to meet President Xi amongst all the tycoons of industry, like Tim Cook, and I guess they had about 40 or so people from the heads of different governments here in China, in America. And when I showed up, that's a terrible job. It's just like a rock star. You have to sit out there and greet all these people every day. It's not very much fun. But anyway, as I approached his face broke into a smile as he recognized me, and he grasped my hand and shook it, and he looked at me in the eye and he says, "China will never forget what you did for us." And that came from the president of China, that he knows the Flying Tigers, and that I'm saying this just as a emphasis on the degree that the Chinese respect the message of the Flying Tigers. Well, I was sat at the head table with him, 4 seats down. And the vice president of Boeing was on my left, and Gillian, and he even mentioned me by name as Harry Moyer, Flying Tiger, in his speech. So that's what they do. They're just enthralled with the spirit that the Flying Tigers gave to China and America. And that's what we want to do, to spread that message to the younger people. We sent 70 people, young students to China a couple months ago, and from different parts of the country. And they're being interviewed.
It is a wonderful story, and we are looking forward, obviously, to even to find out more about how this unfolds. Thank you so much for sharing that and so many of the wonderful details. I just wanted to let our audience know that the Flying Tigers actually destroyed 297 enemy aircraft despite being outnumbered in every engagement. And Harry's story is a permanent exhibit at the San Luis Obispo Museum, near where he currently lives. He was a longtime Westchester resident, which is in our district. There are 14 other museums worldwide that do honor the Flying Tigers. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, Harry. Unfortunately, we're going to have to move on to our next speaker, but we wish you all the very best with your efforts.
Yeah, thank you very much, Harry, for your important work in keeping that relationship between our two countries alive. We really appreciate that. Our next speaker is Megan Nelson, former U.S. Army captain. Megan is a proud West Point graduate. She was stationed at Fort Liberty, North Carolina as an HR officer and then deployed to Kabul, Afghanistan with the Joint Special Operations Command. After returning from Afghanistan, Megan remained at Fort Bragg and served as a detachment commander, jump master, and JCU J1 within JSOC. In her last duty assignment, Megan served as an assistant professor of military science at Virginia Military Institute. She's going to share the story of how she met her husband at West Point. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And to Harry, sir, you know, how remarkable it is to have you here. Thank you for your service and happy belated birthday. I know your birthday was on October 31st, so happy belated birthday. To Congressman Lieu, thank you for allowing me to share my military experience and a story as we honor Veterans Day this year. I had the privilege of attending West Point from 2006 to 2010, not realizing how many doors it would open for me. But today I just want to highlight one of those. I knew that West Point was not your typical college, but that, you know, the 4 years of military, physical, and academic rigor was essentially a path to serving as an officer in the United States Army. What I didn't expect was how just pulling a simple duty one day during the start of my sophomore year would change really the trajectory of my life for, you know, forever. So after plebe year, also known as freshman year, cadets were scrambled into different companies. So, you know, essentially that meant that for the remaining 3 years at West Point, we were in a new company with a fresh start, away from those upperclassmen who made our plebe year so difficult. So it was moving day. Rising sophomores were moving into their new barracks. And I was on something called CQ duty, which is similar to kind of like a RA or resident assistant at a normal college, except I couldn't leave my desk. So I was in charge of, you know, the safety and operations of the company. And I see this tall young man struggling to carry his things up the stairs because he had a sling on his shoulder. Come to find out later, he had just had surgery because he tore his labrum during plebe boxing. And so he's struggling up the stairs. He sees me sitting at the CQ desk, you know, looks back and basically says, "So you're just going to watch me as I struggle to move my stuff up the stairs?" To which I replied, "I'm sorry, I'm on duty. I can't leave my post." So I didn't help him. But later that day, he messaged me on Instant Messenger, and that really became the start of a new relationship. So fast forward, later on that year, I come down with strep throat. And while he could have left me hanging like I did him, he didn't. He came up to my room on a Saturday to bring me medicine and some soup. Now, I don't know if this is the case now at West Point or the service academies, but back then, 2 members of the opposite sex were not allowed in the same room if the door wasn't open to a 90-degree angle. Well, as soon as Marcus entered the room, the door closed behind him. And our tactical officer, making the rounds that weekend to check on the cleanliness of cadets' rooms, opened the door and immediately gave us each 8 hours, walking hours, because the door was closed. And walking hours, if you're not familiar, you haven't heard of what walking hours are, essentially means that a cadet has to dress up, full dress uniform on a weekend, and in the cadet area, walk back and forth, you know, until they reach the number of hours you were given. In this case, you know, it was 8. Well, because Marcus was on the basketball team and in season, his walking hours were in study hall. I had to walk my walking hours and struggling in the snow. But the silver lining in all of this was that while on walking hours, they were looking for cadets to participate in President Obama's inaugural parade. And so, of course, I said yes, you know, and I'm really glad I did because that's a memory that I'm always going to have. You know, well, Marcus and I graduated in 2010 and we were shipped off to locate different duty stations. He went to Korea, Germany, back to his hometown of Virginia. I went to Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, and served in the 82nd Airborne Division and Joint Special Operations Command as a jump master, then ended my military career at VMI as an assistant professor of military science. But that brought us back together as we were both stationed in Virginia, got married and started a family. I just want to end by sharing that my grandfather, who was both a veteran of both the Korean and Vietnam Wars, gave me one piece of advice before going to West Point. I'll never forget. He said, simply follow orders. Well, I did on the CQ at that desk that day in August 2007, and the rest is history. Thank you for having me, and happy Veterans Day.
Megan, thanks for sharing your story. And I actually have a similar story in a way that I met my wife in AIT, and we've been married close to 20 years. So we both benefited a lot from our Army experience on many levels as well. So thank you for sharing your story today.
For sure.
And Janet, did you know the first female West Point student only graduated in 1980? When Megan graduated in 2010, 17% of the cadets were women. And in this year's 2024 class, the percentage is up to 23% of cadets. The school continues to improve and streamline its enrollment process so that women students increasingly participate and enroll in its programs.
And who's our next guest?
Darcy Vanier, Marine First Lieutenant who served in Vietnam as a medevac pilot from 1969 to 1970 and received 3 Distinguished Flying Crosses. Today, Darcy is a member of SAG-AFTRA. He is also a novelist who writes about flying adventures in Vietnam and Africa. Darcy, we are looking forward to hearing your story, and happy 249th Marine Corps birthday tomorrow, sir. The floor is yours. You are on mute, sir. Sorry about that.
You need to unmute, please, Darcy. Go ahead.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, happy birthday to the Marine Corps, 249 years. I was only around for about 5 of them. So, excuse me. I graduated from American University in DC at the time I was working on Capitol Hill, which is a lot. But I got commissioned, went straight to Pensacola, Florida. I went through there, got my wing, and was based in Camp Lejeune. While I was there, I was sent on a Caribbean cruise. Kind of nice, because it wasn't a luxury ship. It was a aircraft carrier from World War II, an Essex class carrier. Still had wooden decks and no angle or any of the rest of it. But while we were out there, a helicopter squadron, I picked up about 200 hours of flight time, which were very important just as far as giving me that extra level of experience before I got to Vietnam. When I got to Vietnam, I was based at Marble Mountain Aircraft Facility, which is right next to the Da Nang Air Base there in northern part of South Vietnam. I was flying CH-46s. Now, the 46 looks like a Chinook. It's not. It's about half the size. And the Marine Corps used the 46 the same way the Army uses it here. You did everything. Squadrons were not assigned to any particular mission. You go in and see what you were flying that day, and you might go off and be flying something medevac for recons, or carrying the mail, or carrying food around to various places. And, I did a Christmas story that was published in the Marine Corps Gazette about taking Christmas dinners out to the troops in the field. They bring the big CH-46s in with them, and we pick them up at the outside bases and haul them off into hilltops and forward bases and that kind of thing. For some reason, the VC seemed to respect Christmas, because I never heard of anybody being hurt on Christmas Day, and we weren't shot on Christmas Day, so that was kind of nice. Because we worked all kinds of missions, we didn't know exactly what we were going to be doing the next day or the next day after that. We got a call that a recon team was under fire, had wounded, they're in the zone, and they wanted to get out of there. Right? So we flew down there. There was 2 CH-46s and 2 gunships, and we had an OV-10 flying overhead and coordinating airstrikes. But they couldn't do that with the team right there. They're in close contact down there. So they decided that because of the density of the triple canopy jungle, they do a ladder extract. Basically, it's like a huge rope ladder that's made out of tubes and all fastened together with stainless steel wire. And excuse me, we got over the zone without really incident on it, and lowered the ladder down. We had to be up there. We were about 500-600 feet above the zone with the ladder coming down off the bottom of the aircraft. And the recon guys would go in there, and they had the equipment that would latch on to the ladder. And once they were all on there, we pulled up straight up out of the trees and dragged them up there. Well, it was kind of very confusing because of the amount of noises. Helicopters in general and the CH-46 had two engines. It was loud from that. It was loud on the radios. I was talking to the team on the ground and my wingman and the gunships, and the sea chief was talking to the gunners, and it was going around like that. We didn't have a lot of armament or anything on us, but we did have 250 caliber machine guns, which makes a lot of noise. And sometimes I thought the noise would be more effective as a weapon than the actual shells coming out of there. As we were going down, we got down and the team started hooking up and everything. And the crew chief, said that the team was away and we were climbing out. Well, all the guns are going off. 50s are being fired. My co-pilot was a gun nut. So he had a Swedish K, which I'd never heard of before or since. But it's an automatic weapon. You pull the trigger once and it continues to fire until it runs out of ammunition. He was firing that out the window on his side of the aircraft. And I'm there. I'm just trying to fly the thing. And as he's going out, he had to go very slowly and be very careful. Otherwise, he didn't want to bag the recon guys into the trees or the mountain or whatever it was in the area there. So all of a sudden, I feel this burning sensation in my neck, then another one in my chest, and I think I've been shot. But nothing else is happening. I mean, I think if we shot, it'd be more than that. The Swedish K would eject the shells out and forward. They would hit the windscreen, bounce back on me, go down on my chest protector, and roll around my chest as I'm sitting there. It didn't take too long to realize, because I knew I wasn't shot at that point, but there was a few very anxious moments there when I was wondering if I was dead. There was another time when I thought I was dead during a rocket attack, and I was 6'2", and the door jam on another base. I wasn't used to the doors and stuff going off the bunkers. Smashed into it, and I was sure I was dead. And I woke up about half an hour later and discovered I wasn't. Anyway, we got them out, took off, pulled them out there. They're dangling off the aircraft like a bunch of fish on the line. I flew them over to a place called Anwar, which is south of Da Nang, and they had a hospital there. So they took care of the 3 wounded recon guys, and we left them there. And we're still sitting on the ground, and we're getting fuel and all. And the leader of the recon team came up, and he starts slapping me on the helmet and hitting me on the arm. I'm going, get this guy off me. What's going on? And he's sitting there screaming in my ear, "You've got us again. You saved us again. You are one crazy person." And finally, I was thinking, he kept calling me crazy. I'm thinking, they're the guy who takes 5 guys to go off to attack a North Vietnamese base camp, and he calls me crazy. So that was kind of a little bit, probably one of my favorite stories, was being shot and not being shot, and then being beat up by the recon guys and the rest of it. But everybody got out. There were no fatalities. I checked later with the team. 3 of them went home, medevaced out home, so they're still around. I hope they're still around. And no one on the crew or anything was hurt. I came back to the U.S. I worked as a flight instructor in Pensacola, which is nice, safe, simple thing. Never got shot at. And when I got out, I was recruited by Ross Perot, who had just bought a brokerage firm. I was going to go off and make $1 million as a broker. And I was with them for a number of months and just hated it. I mean, I wanted to fly my whole life, and I was flying to death. So I signed up. I was recruited by a company called Air Serv that provided aviation facilities for the United Nations in in Sudan, in southern Sudan. And you're doing pretty much the same job we did in Vietnam, but we're working in Chad. After I left them, I was kind of a freelance pilot around Africa, and I was working for Saudi Aramco, which is the Saudi oil company, flying 737s. So it was a little bit different from flight instruction or helicopter flying. I was very happy to be in fixed wing. And one afternoon, a friend of mine, an Australian guy, another pilot, came and knocked on my door and said, I think you better come over and see this. And didn't know what's going on, so I went over there, and that was 9/11. And I'm sitting there in Saudi, we were watching, the switching back and forth between British Sky News and CNN. And what I really remarked on was that they kept trying to find a reason that wasn't warfare. Well, was it bad weather? Was it, the airplanes had maintenance problems and the rest of it? And finally, everybody realized what was actually happening, the tragedy that was going on. And I had a lot of friends in New York, and my then girlfriend, now wife, I figured they were going to go into and hit Los Angeles and a number of other places. And to this day, I believe that numbers of terrorists are going to take more aircraft. And because of the shutdown of all aviation for that day, about 9/12, or whenever they came around to do it, walked off the airplanes with their went off and do whatever everything they were going to do.
Well, Darcy, I'd like to say welcome home. Because of you and all our Vietnam vets, us younger vets really have it a lot better than we would have if not for your guys' sacrifice and willingness to advocate so that no future generation is ever abandoned or lost again. So really appreciate you sharing your story today, and thank you for your service. Congressman, as you know, as a director of LA County Department of Military Veteran Affairs, I have to juggle a few Veteran Day events today. But the rest of the program will be in Janet's capable hands. I just want to say thank you so much to allow me to be part of this and for you doing this every year for us veterans. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim, for being the MC. Really appreciate your service and appreciate all that you do.
So let's introduce our next guest. He is Daniel Campbell, a former U.S. Marine Special Operations Group's 2nd Anglico Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and 3rd Recon Battalion Camp Schwab, Okinawa, Japan. Today, he's going to tell a story about the strenuous training required for working in the Special Operations Unit. Daniel, we're waiting to hear all about it.
Okay, thanks for the kind introduction. I'm very honored to be in the presence of so many auspicious former service members of our service branch, and appreciate the opportunity to talk about my small experience. I'm going to tell you, I was a Marine. I graduated from boot camp out of San Diego and ended up in Camp Lejeune. And I'm going to talk to you about becoming a water safety survivor instructor. Oddly enough, this job is to try and train other fellow Marines, sailors, airmen, and soldiers. Because sometimes they fall overboard. Sometimes they have to get through the last 100 yards of the land off their landing craft to shore, carrying a 50, 60 pounds worth of equipment, kind of like you saw horrifically in some World War II movies. It's a stressful environment, and especially at night, it's prone to inducing panic and drowning. So in order to qualify as an instructor, you have to go through a water safety survival training and pass all the fitness and medical tests that go along with that. And I'll talk about three of them. They're called the acquired confidence tests. We call them ACT skills, and they simulate like you know, are either in a survival escape mode or you fall off a boat or you just want to figure out how to survive in the water. As a high school competitive swimmer, and I surfed at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and at Camp Schwab in Okinawa, I've always been really comfortable in open water. And it's probably the reason I was recommended for instructor training. However, I was also trained for jump school at Fort Moore. I was Benning during my service time. And while that training was kind of intense, I found the water safety survival training to be the most challenging during my time in the Marine Corps, in part because of these ACT skills. And you had to pass the ACT skills. They were mandatory to become an instructor. The first ACT skill, they tie your legs together. They push you off the side of the pool and do a 20-foot diving well, and you have to survive for an hour. For most of us, this was the easiest ACT skill. The second ACT skill is they tie your hands in front of you, and you have to survive in the water for an hour. Again, nearly 3/4 of the class didn't view this as particularly difficult. The third ACT skill was a challenge for most of us. They put you on a high diving platform like you see in the Olympics. They tie your feet together, they tie your hands behind your back, they blindfold you. And I thought to myself, no problem. I'll do a dolphin kick. I'll dolphin kick my way to the surface. I did not pass this part of the test with that strategy. You have to understand there are three types of human buoyancy. There's positive, neutral, and negative. Positive, you float. Neutral, you need a moderately active body to stay afloat. And negative, you sink. You have to actively use your body to stay on the surface. I'm just a little bit negatively buoyant, so I was going to have my work cut out for me. When they push you off that high diving platform, you hit the bottom at about 20 feet, and there's quite a bit of pressure on your ears. So that kind of throws you off a bit. As I did my dolphin kick strategy as I planned, I got to the surface the first time and soon realized that the strategy was incredibly difficult. And after that, I panicked. It was the first time in my life I have ever panicked, and one of the few times in my life since I've ever panicked. Um, when people say panic can kill you, they are absolutely correct because I lived through that. I was swallowing water and starting to drown. Of course, they had safety divers, but they kind of let you hang for anywhere from 90 seconds to 2 minutes, which seems a lot longer than that. So they want to see if you can eventually get yourself out of it. But they had to jump in and rescue me. They gave me about an hour to pull myself together before I had to try it again. It only felt like 15 minutes. I had to pass the third part of the test in order to be an instructor or flunk out. So I came up with another strategy that some of my other fellow Marines were using. I knew our lungs act like natural life preservers. When I reached the bottom the second time, I gently pushed off and I bent over, let my lungs lift me to the surface. And when the back of my head broke the surface of the water, you can raise your head for a quick moment, take a breath, and you would sink back down. And I would sink anywhere from 6 to 9 feet. And I'd bend over again, let my lungs fill up with the air, and the buoyancy would again break my back of the head would break the surface of the water, and you do it all over again. Now you have to do that for an hour. You have to focus and clear your mind of panic because it literally is always lurking. If I screw this up, it's not going to be fun. And it was not fun completing that third ACT skill. And, you know, just anecdotally for my class, about 65% of the Marines passed the course. And I was a little surprised because there were a bunch of very physically fit and smart Marines that you had to pass both the written portion and the physicality of the course. And uh, and get through the emergency protocol calls aside from just the act skills. What I think was most important about the act skills, which may be an outlier for the Marine Corps, but I think it gave us some empathy. You know, understanding how to be a better instructor for people that fear the water and maybe allow them to hold off that panic or fear for a few moments with a few simple strategies that, if needed, could save their lives. Um, and today I'm back actually working to get into the water industry for our municipal water supplies and wastewater supplies, and water is just a part of my life. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Congressman. And a shout out to the Congressman. He's personally helped my family in the past, and I'm very grateful to his office, who have always been kind, efficient, and very good at what they do. And again, happy Marine Corps birthday.
Daniel, thank you for providing the insight into the training for the Marine Special Operations Group instructors. Folks might not know that the Marine Special Operations Unit was only created in October 2005 by the Secretary of Defense. Their current mission includes counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, and as a special component, they are tasked to recruit, organize, train, and equip and deploy special operations forces worldwide, which is what you were part of. And thanks so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
We'll go to our next speaker, who is Austin Harville. And Austin is an Air Force veteran who served in active duty from 2011 to 2018. He continues to serve in the Air National Guard. His profession has always been public affairs. He currently is a communications specialist for UCLA. Austin's going to give us some insight about what's involved in doing an air defense mission. Austin.
Thanks, Janet. And I wanted to say thanks to Jim. He personally was involved in helping me get settled into LA after taking my job here at UCLA. I thank the Congressman for having this opportunity, and to all my other fellow veterans that are here today. Your stories are incredible, and I hear a lot of stories, and that's what we're going to talk about today. As a public affairs airman, my whole job, for those that are the uninitiated, is to tell the stories of veterans, or I should say of service members in their service, whatever they're doing, with the intent of letting the taxpayer know what the military uses the money for, right? So whatever missions are being done, whatever training is happening, my whole job, and you can see in that photo, is to take photos and to be involved in every different career field that exists. I had the unique opportunity to be involved in a very strange operation. Not so much that it was unique to the non-military people, but for veterans, it's I think unique because it was an overseas mission. But I was stationed in Italy, but it was technically a combat mission. But it was out of Italy, and this is not World War II we're talking about. We're talking about this is in 2018 or 2016. And it had to do with so at the time Assad in Syria, when that conflict was really escalated, and we weren't sure how far the regime was going to take their efforts. Um, Long story short, on the political side, there was some contention, and we decided we as the United States wanted to have a show of force and destroy some Syrian government infrastructure. Now, coming from the ocean, the Navy was going to be the striking element of the complete operation. But the Air Force out of Aviano Air Base, Italy, was tasked with air defense. And if this is unique because if you look at the status of forces agreements, which is an agreement that's made between a host nation and the United States that are stationed in the host nation, of what the forces are allowed and not allowed to do.
And most of the time when you hear about a SOFA agreement, it's talking about, oh, spouses can and cannot have these jobs. You must hire this many Italians. It seems very, very kind of mundane. But part of status forces agreements is how the military may or may not involve themselves in operations from host nation soil, as it were. And in the case of Italy, they refused to have any attacking, basically, happening from Italian soil. So because of that, the Air Force couldn't, from Aviano, participate in any of the striking actions happening against the Syrian target. But there was nothing about not being able to provide defense. So F-15s coming out of somewhere out in England, one of the military bases we had out there, and our native F-16 fighter jets were all primed and ready to do air defense. And what's unique about air defense is at the time in 2016 and throughout most of OIF and OEF, a lot of our efforts were revolved around bombing. So bombing out, terrorist strongholds, infrastructure across Afghanistan and Iraq. So a lot of the time when you're taking photos like I was, you're taking photos of with birds taken off with fake bombs, pretending to blow up targets for their training. Air to air was not a big part of our training environment because we didn't have a peer that had an air force that we had to train for that. This was the exception. So every pad, most of the pads, which is where the aircraft sit, the aircraft aprons where an F-16 will sit before taking off or to be fueled, armed, etc. They're usually pretty empty on Aviano Air Base. But this day that I got to go take some photos, it was completely full. Every pad was full. And what's so unique about Sidewinders is it's a very, very small munition. It's an air-to-air munition. It's only good for air-to-air defense or strike. And they look like teeth. When you look at the profile from the top of an F-16 or an F-15 or any real fighter jet armed with Sidewinders, they normally you might have like 2 bombs on F-16, but because of how small the Sidewinder is, you could have, if I remember correctly, something like 5 or 4 to 6 per wing. So 8 to 12 on the entire aircraft. And it differs between the F-16 and the F-15. So for any of my technically minded comrades, I apologize. But it was intimidating. It was scary. It was actually the first time that I had the opportunity to see air power really presented in a way that I could tell would do some damage if someone tried to make an impact on us. What was extremely special about this mission was I was the NCO in charge of the operation for coverage. So I had a team of guys, and a few guys came out from England, and it was my job to get them on the KC-130s and I don't know if we had other refueling aircraft, but basically, if you want to take photos of airplanes in the sky, it's really hard to fit an extra person in a fighter pilot. So typically, if you want to get an airplane airborne, you're going to get photos of them outside of a heavy or outside of a refueling aircraft, outside the boom. So when F-16 and F-15 goes up in the air, it obviously has a much smaller fuel tank than if we filled up an entire Boeing 747, which is in essence what a C-130 or KC-135 is. And so you get one of the photographers to get where the boom operator is manned. There's actually spots on either side of the boom operator that are used for training new boom operators, but if there's no one in training, you have a very convenient spot to put a photographer. And so the boom is when it comes out the back of the plane to refuel the plane. So if you ever see those videos of a plane coming up behind a big aircraft and have the nozzle come in basically like that, looks like the head of the aircraft, that's the boom operator. This was an entire nighttime operation though. So we, for the first time ever, got to engage with night vision lenses, which I know for those that aren't photographers doesn't sound very interesting, but for us, it was the coolest thing ever to be able to use night vision on our DSLR cameras. And I sent some guys up. It was really interesting. I never had to have a contingency plan for if I lost a guy. And that was the first time in my career where, though the chances were very, very low, risk management, basically forced upon us, like if this bird goes down, what will you do to ensure continued coverage? So that way you can still get the photos. Do you have alternates basically? So that was kind of the first thing that was really kind of like, whoa, this is real. And the second thing was just the photos that my guys came back with. So as the NCOIC of that operation, uh, I was vetting all of the photos before they went to security review. And some of the video as well. And it would be extremely terrifying because out the back of the boom, when there's in night vision, when there's nothing outside of the aircraft, it's completely pitch black. The night vision, obviously, you're not picking up what's going on in the ocean miles and miles and miles away. So all you would see is just the stick of the boom and nothing else. And then a flash of the the tail lights basically. And then out of nowhere, coming back to that imagery that I saw on the pad driving around, out of just the utter darkness, this black inkiness would come an F-16 and F-15, uh, fully loaded. And it was all silent, of course, because you're inside the airplane. It's already loud. You couldn't hear anything. Um, so you hear just the whir of engines, and then you see a fully primed, ready to roll aircraft come up, get fuel. It's too dark. Typically, when you take these photos in the daytime, you can see the pilot. It's kind of a little bit more like personable. Honestly, you can get a good zoom lens on it. You can get a photo of the pilot giving you like, a shock bra or, thumbs up or something like that. But not here. It's too dark. So it's this faceless, just entity of destruction comes up, gets refueled, and then rolls right back out silently. It's extremely efficient. Normally, they like to take their time with the refueling process to make sure that they get a really good connection, work on their training, because there's different airflows that happen behind the KC-135, right? Never miss a training opportunity except for when you're in actual combat. And that's exactly what happened. So they'd come in really fast, refuel, and come right back out. And the imagery that came out of that really showcased, I think, to a lot of the people in Italy, especially, the level of defense that they had by having us around. And for me, as a veteran, looking back on it, it really makes me appreciate that even with a job that's so esoteric as photography, a lot of my colleagues here are telling their own war stories, are very personal and very in your face, even from that much removed of a position. It's just super exciting to see that the work we do is extremely important, and people around the world, globally, truly globally, appreciate what we do and everything that we stand for.
Austin, thank you so much for giving us a behind the scenes look of all those many different
Thank you.
elements. Really appreciate it. We're going to go to our next guest. She's Air Force Colonel retired Teresa Stark. Teresa served in all three components of the Air Force over a 35-year period. That included the Guard, active duty, and the reserves. Her profession was Medical Service Corps. Today, she is the Associate Director of CalVets Home on the West Los Angeles VA campus. Teresa, what story do you want to share today?
Good morning, and thank you everyone for having me. I'd like to share two deployment experiences and how I feel that they made me ready to adapt to civilian life. When you're in the Guard and Reserve, you do actually participate typically in civilian sector, which I think I didn't know it at the time, but currently I see so many people that have done all active duty, and we have a lot of products and services that are geared toward helping people transition back to the civilian sector. So I didn't know what a benefit it was. So here we go. In 1986, I enlisted in the Air Force, and I was a biomedical equipment repair technician, always in support of clinicians. I transferred to the California Air National Guard at March Air Reserve Base, where I picked up my commission in 1997. I was a Medical Service Corps officer. Later on, I went back to active duty in 2002, going back to Health Services Administration schools, various assignments. And I had a love of medical logistics, mainly because I kept my pulse on the BMETs. So it was a good fit for me. I could also keep an eye on David Grant Medical Center, which I had the fortunate opportunity of opening in 1988 as an A1C or E3. So I always wanted to watch my baby, as it were. So going forward, my first deployment that I volunteered for, by the way, was in 2005. I had gone to Balad Air Base, the 332nd Expeditionary Air Wing in Balad, Iraq. And at that time, I was a captain, and I was the OIC of the Contingency Aeromedical Staging Facility. And in that role, we take wounded warriors, we take them from the ER, we load them on, at that time, the C-141 or C-17, going back to Landstuhl, Army base in Ramstein, Germany. So that was interesting because I saw we were on the receiving end of the miraculous life-saving work that the clinical teams had done to military members. So it was very gratifying to be a part of those teams to send those service members back home. We also had the opportunity to participate in those formations where military members they gave the ultimate sacrifice. And it was definitely an honor to send them back home to loved ones and to our country. I had a good dwell time of 18 months, and I was back in Balad in 2007. And in that role, I was the aeromedical evacuations officer, and we ran the PAD, which was the patient admin division. And we essentially got folks off the helicopters, the Black Hawks, and rushed them into the ER. We also received casualties from ambulances. So not to mention that, if we even had walking wounded, we got those too. And I also was one to establish a morgue that was in the back of the hospital. We were not part of mortuary affairs. We work with mortuary affairs eventually, but before we had our own morgue, we would keep the deceased in the best honorable place in the hospital until mortuary affairs arrived. So I was honored to be a part of establishing the morgue at that time. So the one thing about the two deployments is that I had been in training for 19 years in the Guard, at the duty at the time. We'd always do exercises, red flag, various named exercises. But when you deploy, you have the opportunity to use that training. And I felt very honored. I've been a person that's always been on the applied side, the operations side. So being deployed was in my area where I thrived. It also allowed me to think on my feet. When you train well and you apply training, you don't panic as much. I had my moments of panic because I wasn't at home. I didn't have all the American supplies or backups or things right there at my disposal. But one thing it taught me is to think. Don't panic, think. And my years of being a BMET, I could fashion something out of nothing and make it work to support the clinical team. So that was fun. So I finished up active duty in 2011, and I went back home to March Air Reserve Base and did some stuff and aged out of there in 2017. So I went to the 349th Aeromedical Evacuation Squadron, and I was back at home again doing things stateside, moving patients across the country, across the world. You know, if I got a TDY to Germany or wherever I was called, I love being in the air. That's another thing. And we would reconfigure C-17s into flying hospitals. And it's amazing the technology and the skill that goes into that, maintaining a patient in various altitudes, you know, communicating with the pilot. We go up and down depending on the patient load that we have. It's just a phenomenal honor to do that mission. I retired out of the United States Air Force in October of 2021. I became the deputy administrator at the Veterans Home of California on the West LA campus there. We're a state entity, and I'll be retiring from that job next month. And it's always an honor to serve the military community, whether in uniform or as a civilian. And I look forward to more opportunities to serve my comrade veterans as I move forward in a retired life. Thank you.
Teresa, thank you so much for sharing your story. That's such an important work, and we wish you all the best in your second, third, fourth retirement as you move along. So pretty much to end our program with a little patriotic music, U.S. Army retired E6 Staff Sergeant Michael Jackson, known in the service as Michael Wajax, is going to sing for us. Michael, we're looking forward to hearing your rendition of one of my favorite patriotic songs, God Bless America. The stage is yours. You are muted. You need to start again. You're muted.
There you go.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the valleys, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Sing along with me, Zoom. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the valleys, to the ocean, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Oh, that was really great. Thank you so much. Michael was in the Air Force and in the Army. He served for over 27 and a half years. And now, Congressman Lieu, do you have any final remarks for us?
I do. I want to thank all our amazing veterans for sharing their wonderful stories. I am presenting a certificate of congressional recognition. Each of the veterans will get one, and it's going to say, in recognition of sharing your story at the Conversations with Veterans event and with sincere appreciation for the sacrifices you made for our country. So, congratulations to all the veterans today for their service and for sharing their experiences. I also want to thank Tak Fukushima for leading the Pledge of Allegiance, Maxine Reyes for her wonderful rendition of our national anthem, and to Michael Jackson for his amazing rendition of God Bless America. And special thanks go to Jim Zenner for being the master ceremonies for this event. And I want to thank my amazing staff who helped make this possible, to Janet Turner, who primarily organized this event, as well as my district director, Nicolas Rodriguez, for doing not only great leadership on our district office, but also handling the technical aspects of this Zoom call, as well as to our field rep, Karen Calderon, for assisting with the event. And we have two of our interns today who helped out, Ann Gu and Grant Lee. So thank you again for participating, and may all of you have a wonderful Veterans Day.
Thank you, Congressman, for hosting this event each year. And thank you to the speakers for sharing your inspirational stories, and to Maxine Reyes and Michael Jackson for providing the patriotic music. And of course, to our wonderful MC, Jim Zenner. And special thanks to the community for coming out to support our veterans and to show your appreciation. Don't turn off too quickly, because as we go out, we're going to play those pictures again that you saw of then and now of all the speakers. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Thanks for being with us today. Bye now.
So thank you again to all the speakers. Really appreciate you participating in this event, and may all of you have a wonderful Veterans Day weekend, and happy Veterans Day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you again for all of those who participated, and then obviously for everyone who was gracious enough to join us today as we hosted this event live. We will be posting this on Congressman Lieu's social media pages, his YouTube page, Facebook, Twitter, and maybe a link on Instagram. Thank you again, and thank you again to all of the veterans and service members who are served our nation. Have a great day.